friends, welcome back to my channel. Today we're chatting about the books that I read in January, and we're going to do something a little bit different. I have my old iPad mini. Man, this thing is archaic at this point, but we're going to attempt to only spend 1 minute talking about each book, because throughout the month I have chatted a little bit about the books that I've been reading, and so I don't need to go in depth about any of these books, but I wanted to talk about all the books that I read in January in one place. So that's what this video is, and we're going to limit our discussion to 60 seconds. I was going to do 90 seconds because I only read 10 books, but like I said, this is an archaic iPad, so it doesn't have seconds in the timer. I can only do it in 1 minute increments. So it's either 1 or 2 minutes, and we can't do 2 minutes because then that would be a 20-minute video. So see, we're already past a minute. So we're going to set the timer. We're going to talk about the books. So let's go. And I don't have most of these early books because I returned them to the library. Most of the books that I read in January were from the library, but I'll talk about that afterwards. So first book that I read in January was Matilda by Roald Dahl, which was delightful. It was about a little girl who learned to read all by herself, and she was out of place in her family because her parents and her siblings were not anything like her. She was frequently abandoned, and so she would take herself to the library, and she taught herself how to read, and she read classics, and she was amazing. And then she found out that she had this gift, this talent, and she used it to help solve the problems of people around her. So I love that. It's a little bit about her at home and at school and her relationships, and so it was delightful. And so Matilda by Roald Dahl was one of my favorite reads. It's also the first book that I finished in January, and we still have 3 seconds to go to 1. I did it. Okay, so now the second book that I read in January was Glory by Violet Bulawayo, and she's a Zimbabwean author, and this was a fictionalized representation of the change of government in Zimbabwe from Mugabe, who was a long reigning president of Zimbabwe, and what happened after Mugabe. So like I said, this is fictionalized, so the author is talking a little bit about Zimbabwean life and culture, but also shading it a little bit, making the characters into animals, so people's positions were reflected by the kind of animal that they were. I love the human element that she gave this revolution, where the book tone changes. We ran out of time. Yeah, the book tone changes a little bit, where she starts to talk about how the revolution affects individuals, and there's some sad moments. We're going a little over time, but there's some really thoughtful moments in there, but I love the human element. So that was Glory by Violet Bulawayo. So we're going to start the timer again. And the third book that I finished in January was Brown Girls by Daphne Palasi Andreades. And this was set in Queens, New York, and it is talking about daughters of immigrants growing up in Queens, New York, and a little bit about where their lives could take them, you know, how their ambitions that have been taught them by their families, how it pushes them away from their families as they start to have lives that the older members of their family, the previous generation, didn't get a chance to experience. And a little bit about what those opportunities look like as these girls grow up and start to pursue them, how it separates them from their families, separates them from even their friends as they each take their own path. And so the author writes in second person, and I love how she explores that multiplicity of experiences. So highly recommend that book as well. Brown Girls by Daphne Palasi Andreades, set in Queens, New York, about New York life and about brown girls. So yeah, we're doing really well, guys. We're doing really well. We went over time on the second one, but number 3 was really good. So then I read The Girls by Edna Ferber, and this was a buddy read, and I enjoyed this book a lot more than my buddy readers. One of the things that we talked about was how Edna Ferber, in writing about Chicago life and society in the early 1900s, she captures a lot of the hierarchy of the social structure, but focuses really on white middle to upper class people and almost writes a little in a little derogatory way about people who are not from that social strata. So she talks unfavorably about poor white people as well as black people. And so my other buddy readers didn't like the racist undertones that were mentioned in a lot of places, but I feel like I learned some things about Chicago life in that time and space. And I love the fact that we're reading about older women, because I love reading books about older women, and we're out of time. So that's what The Girls was about. Edna Ferber's The Girls. I think this is going really well, guys. So I wanted to mention that that was a book that was published in 1921, so it's over 100 years old. And I think The Girls by Edna Ferber, I think it's being republished or reprinted maybe this year. So I wanted to put that on your radar as well. So next 60-second segment goes to Our Missing Hearts by Celeste Ng, which I really enjoyed. Celeste Ng is an Asian woman, Asian American woman, and she writes about Asian American life. And so I really like this one because she centers on the Asian experience in America, which right now is difficult because there's a lot of anti-Asian sentiment, and it's prolific. You hear it in a lot of spaces, in a lot of places in America. You know, people who are of Chinese descent being blamed for COVID and for the economic crisis. And so the author incorporates all of that in a slightly dystopic experience, slightly dystopic writing. And so she's talking about kind of futuristic, what would happen if there was actually a law that legalized that anti-Asian sentiment. So we're out of time. But I did a full review, so you could go check that one out if you want to hear more of my thoughts on Our Missing Hearts by Celeste Ng. So this is great, guys. This is great. I'm limiting myself. So because I read that around Chinese New Year, it also gave me a desire to read more Asian writing, I suppose. So my next book was Concerning My Daughter, and this was translated from Korean, and it is about an older woman who works in a nursing home, and the woman that she takes care of in the nursing home calls her mama because she is suffering from dementia, and you know, her grasp on reality is not so great. So this older woman calls her mama. But it's also about this character's relationship with her adult daughter, who she probably wants to call her mama, and this girl doesn't, because they're kind of at odds in their relationship. The daughter has moved back home to live with her mother, her aging mother, and they see life differently. They're at very different points in their life. They've been raised in different times in society, and so this is kind of stressful. I'm going to take 10 more seconds. I'm going to take 10 more seconds just to wrap this up, because I did make a full review I made a full review video of this book as well. So yeah, Concerning My Daughter is set in Korea, but it tells a story that could happen anywhere, because we see people from different generations wanting to reach out to people from the other generation, but not really being able to, just because we're raised differently, we think differently. And there's a little bit of that desire to repress thought and wanting to hold what you think in, because you're afraid of how it will get its own life if you put it out there. You know, if you say something, you can't take it back. You're afraid that it might hurt someone. You're afraid it might offend someone. But more than that, you're also afraid of what it might reveal about you, because you're not really sure how much of yourself you want to show and share with other people. So love this book, and I have a full review video about it, so if you want to go check it out. So then we get 1 minute to chat about Poppy Show by Leonie Ross. This was the Run Right Reads book club pick for January, and I made a full review video that is going to come on the channel very soon, but I've already uploaded it. So this was set in a fictional Caribbean country called Poppy Show, and it's a little bit about some of the foolishness that happens and is put on public display. This place is a magical place, and all the people there have a gift, and if they all use their gift collectively, they would make this place fantastic. But people are selfish, and people are unwilling to accept the gift that they've been given, so not everybody is actually working to pursue their gift. Some people are more focused on squelching the gifts that other people have, and some people are trying to change other people because they're dissatisfied with them being homosexual, or being just too free, people who question authority, that kind of thing. So we're out of time, but Poppy Show by Leonie Ross. A full review video is coming. Oh, I have to turn that off. A full review video is coming. I loved it. I think the author does a fantastic job of capturing a lot of the elements of Caribbean life, but also the human experience. She talks a little bit about, you know, how women see themselves and how women see each other, and how women are viewed by the world, by society. You know, some of the ambitions that women may have for themselves and what they have to sacrifice in order to pursue those other things that they want. So a more complete video discussion is coming. Look out for it coming on the channel very soon. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, please use this as an opportunity to hit that subscribe button so you'll know when and hit the bell, I guess, to get notified, so you'll know when videos come out, because I have a lot of videos coming out very soon. So a couple more books to chat about, because at the end of the month I tried to finish up some books, and at least one of these didn't get finished until February 1st, but that's fine. We're chatting about it in the January recap because most of the reading was done in January. So 1 minute to chat about Anne of the Island by L.M. Montgomery. So this is the third book in the Anne of Green Gables series, and man, do I love this series. I've heard about the book, I've heard about the series, I've heard about the books, but when I started reading the series last year, I read the first 2 books, and I'm just like, I want to know Anne. Like, not really, because she lives in Canada. Prince Edward Island is where this book is set, and she's also living in a former time, but it's just such, it's so charming. The writing is just so like immersive and enveloping, like you want to be there with Anne. So we meet her as a little girl, a brother and sister who live together, and they've adopted this little girl. So we meet her as a young orphan, now becoming an adoptee. And so that's the first book. And in the second book, we read about her growing up a little bit. And then Anne of the Island has her going to college. And it's a little bit about her 4 years of college and the change in her life, change in her social life, the change in her experience as she is getting older. She's now late teens to early 20s. And we see her growing up, and so the writing is maturing a little bit with her. But I love how the author stays true to the core of who Anne is, so we still get a little bit of that whimsy, a little bit of that fantasy, a little bit of that dreamy state, a little bit of that romantic pursuit, and also a little bit of her understanding that romance doesn't always look like romance, but it can still be romance. So I love this book. And the author also incorporates some moralistic kind of Christian writing in the book. So, you know, it's not a book that everybody might enjoy in the same way, but man, I love it. I love this series. So the author has set up what the next book is going to be about, and I'm here for it. Oh, I was supposed to be showing you covers. So this was Poppy Show by Leonie Ross. Sorry. This was Anne of the Island, L.M. Montgomery. So we have to start the timer, right? So starting the timer. Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury is the next book that I finished. And I really enjoyed this one. It's about 158 pages. And it's set in a little bit of a futuristic, dystopic society where people don't read books. And instead, they interact with TV. They're interacting with, it seems like reality television, where they've allowed entertainment to just come into their homes, into their spaces, and invade their subconscious in some way. And a little bit of the dissatisfaction that it brings, even though people don't necessarily understand their relationship to this media that they're consuming. But more than that, it's about how people have disregarded literature. A little bit about how the government has taken on that attitude and has kind of outlawed books and reading, but more on how people have relinquished their relationship with books. So love that. Oh, timer's up. 1 minute is up. So really enjoyed this one. I want to talk more about this, but yeah, if you've read this book, let's chat in the comments. And if you haven't, would highly recommend it. It's pretty short, so it's a quick read. And I love that there are lots of literary references, even if it's a book about, you know, why books should be abolished. or not. There's a lot of literary references. Would love to just I'd love to reread that book at some point. So would love to chat with you in the comments if you have read it. And then the last book that I finished, so we're going to set the timer, is The Swedish Art of Death, The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning by Margareta Magnusson. The author is Swedish, so a Scandinavian woman writing about decluttering your space, but also decluttering your life. And how she says it is preparing yourself for when you're no longer here, to take care of your possessions, leaving things in a way so that someone else doesn't have like the burden of sorting through the stuff. So in here, she talks a little bit about her experience cleaning up after other people have died, and also about how she's preparing her own space for after she is gone, leaving things so things are easier for her 5 children. And so because the author is Swedish, it's memoir style, and she writes a little bit about her experience raising her family, traveling the world, and what it was like in her younger days, and comparing that to the experiences that she's having now as an older person. And so, she talks about the need for this kind of cleaning, but she also talks about the joy of doing it. I know I'm just ignoring the timer at this point. We're done. This is the last book that I'm talking about in this video. But she talks about the joy of returning to your possessions, returning to the memories that you can find from revisiting things that you haven't seen in a long time. So she talks about how when you go through your stuff, yes, you can get the opportunity to clean up and discard things or move things, rehome things, and not just inanimate objects. She also talks about her relationship with animals and so on. But she also talks about the joy of just kind of revisiting things. Things that you haven't seen or interacted with for a long time, but maybe they live in your house, letters and old receipts and so on. And so, yeah, love this book. The author is really funny. So before we close this video, I'll just read you a couple of things that she said. This is from page 93 in the book, where she's talking about correspondence and communication. And she says, "I really do not know if my grandchildren can write at all. I mean, with pen on paper. Nobody seems to do that anymore. I know that they're good at drawing, but considering the number of thank you letters I have received during recent years, I'm really not convinced that they even know how to write, or if my presents to them ever arrived." Like, that's really cheeky, right? But I love it. Her writing style is just beautiful. And this is a short book. It is just 115 pages. And a couple of pages in the back are recipes that she shares. So it's beautiful. And the author, she's not just a writer. In her life, she was also an artist, a sketch artist. And so the book has these little paper and ink drawings. Is that what you call them? And she mentions a lot of Swedish terms and words in here. So highly recommend this one. It's a short read, quick read. One of the YouTubers who I watched their videos on cleaning and decluttering mentioned this book. And so I said, well, those are not booktube videos, but I'm going to get bookish recommendations from them. So I got that from the library and I loved it. And so those are the 10 books that I finished. That was my reading in January and February 1st, because I finished a couple of books on February 1st. I wanted to include them here. So don't hate me. Don't hate me. I'm cheating a little bit, but don't hate me. Now we're done with January. We can return these books to the library and start on our February readings. So hope you'll be here for that. Let me know in the comments down below what you finished, how many books you finished in January. Like I said, I finished 10. I was this close to finishing book 11, but I'm not. So just I'll leave it. I'll leave it. I'm reading this really great book. It's a NetGalley download, and I'm really enjoying it. So I don't want to rush it, savoring it. I'll finish it at some point. We'll chat about it then. So yeah, those are the books that I finished in January and February 1st. Let me know in the comments if you've read them, what you thought about them, and if anything I said in this video makes you want to pick up any of these books. Let me know which book that is that you'll be reading on my recommendation. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more. We'll be back soon with another one. And until we come back for that next video, happy reading. Bye.